There's a famous story told. I don't know how reliable the story is, but there's a famous story told. And with stories like this, I always say, I don't know if the story is true or not, but they don't tell stories like this about you and me. That Rav Yisroel Salanter, Rav Israel Lipkin of Salant, this is Rav Wolbe's Rebbe's Rebbe, was traveling on a train. And he was going to a certain city, and there was a couple of Jews that were sitting next to him in the train. They were sitting opposite him, and these Jews started to talk, and this conversation came around to this great saint that lived in that part of Europe by the name of Rav Yisroel Salanter. And in front of Rav Yisroel, they started speaking about how he's amazing and he's spectacular, he's such a good person, he's a tzaddik, he's righteous, and they went on. And at a certain point, he couldn't take it anymore. And he leaned over to them and he said, I want you to know something. I know the man, he's not such a saint. So the story is they beat him up. Because he was saying bad things about Rav Yisroel Salanter, they beat him up. And then when they got to the train station, this fellow who they were traveling with, this older man, he got off the train, and as he was walking off the train, there was an immense crowd, and these two men were looking out to see like this immense crowd. And then they saw the immense crowd greeted this man who they had roughed up on the train. So they asked somebody, who was that masked man? And the person said, you didn't know that was Rav Yisroel Salanter. So these two men sought out Rav Yisroel Salanter in the city, and they went in to see him, and they said to him, you can imagine their embarrassment and their horror, and they said, we are so sorry. Please, please, please forgive us. And Rav Yisroel Salanter said to them, he said, I could forgive you, but he said, you didn't rough up Rav Yisroel Salanter. You roughed up some anonymous person on a train. Go get forgiveness from that person. It's a very interesting perspective he had. Meaning, like, you're only asking for forgiveness because now you know who I am. But that's not who you beat up. You beat up some anonymous person. When you do tshuva on that, come back. That's what he was saying to them. But nonetheless, you see, he hid himself. By the way, Rav Yisroel Salanter, it's well known, he went into exile. He went into Galus, so to speak. He traveled throughout Western Europe. He was in Paris, he was in all these interesting cities. And when he went to these places, he would lecture to try to get people to come back to Torah. He was doing, I don't know what else to call it. Today it would be called kiruv, what he was doing. He was trying to get people to come back to Torah observance, trying to reinterest them in their heritage. And when he was traveling in Western Europe, of course, nobody knew who he was. Nobody knew who he was. Even if you put up his name, no one would have known who he was in Paris. He was unknown. And the Talmidim, the students said that he enjoyed the anonymity. Okay? And then there's other stories. I'll just tell you one more story. I'm sorry for taking all the time with the stories, but sometimes you'll understand the whole idea better if you can see it. So he was traveling with a student of his, and he was trying to give Musar, the whole Torah science of refining human character, a good name. And it was hard because there were a lot of Orthodox Jewish intellectuals who enjoyed the study of Talmud, but not everybody was into character refinement at the time. The Enlightenment had devastated the Jewish nation, and the whole concept of us being a refined nation, that had been lost in many quarters. There were people who were ritually observant, but not necessarily models of ethics, which was a complete betrayal of what God had asked from us at Mount Sinai. We were supposed to be ritually observant and ethical models. So he would go to these shuls, or these Batei Midrash, these houses of Jewish study, and he would give lectures with the intention of showing people that a person who valued Musar was also a Torah scholar, so they could relate to him and respect him. And of course, he didn't want to give away too much of who he was, but nevertheless, he wanted to get people to go, wow, that man knows what he's talking about, and he values Musar, I should look into it. The custom was that in those days there were no movies, So when people wanted entertainment, they would go for Torah edutainment. And in the shul, they would know that there's a speaker who's coming to town, and he's going to speak on Saturday night, and anyone who's interested should come to the shul. So they put up a sign. When Salanter got to town, he put up a sign in this shul saying that he would be speaking on whatever it was, Tuesday night. And here are the sources that he was going to base his lecture on. So if anyone wanted to look up these pages of the Talmud, and these pages in the Medrash, and these pages in the Halacha, in the Jewish law, that they would be able to look it up in advance and be familiar with the sources so that they would appreciate the depth of the message he was sending. And people took it seriously in those days. They used to look up the sources. He put up the sources. That was early in the morning. And then he came back that night to teach. And as he was walking into the shul, he glanced out of the corner of his eye, and his students saw him do it. And he noticed that some enemy of Musar, someone who didn't want anyone to know about or respect this approach to human refinement, had that morning taken down all the sources that he had put up and put up a random list of sources that were completely unrelated. And that way people would look at this random list of sources, and when he started to speak, no one would understand what he was talking about, and no one would be impressed. The student saw, when Rabbi Salanter went into the shul, that he glanced out of the corner of his eye. He saw Rabbi Salanter walk into the shul. Rabbi Salanter went up to the podium in the front of the shul. He was about to deliver his talk, and he paused. And he stood there for a full minute. And he thought, and he thought, and he thought, and the student said you could see he was really struggling. He was exerting himself intellectually beyond what was normal for him. And after 1 minute, he opened his eyes and he gave the most brilliant discourse on the random list of sources that had been posted on the wall. Blew everybody away. So the talk ended, the people were blown away by it, and Rabbi Salanter got up and he walked out. He didn't want the praise. He got up and he walked out, and he walked out with his student. And as he and his student were walking down the street, the student said to him, "Rabbi, I know you. I know it did not take you a full minute to put together that talk. What were you doing during that minute?" And he said, "I was going back and forth in my head because I knew there was one person in that room who would really know who I was when I said it. I wasn't sure if it was haughtiness or not to perform in front of that person." He said, "After a full minute, I finally decided, even if it puts me in danger of haughtiness, it's better than profaning God's name by delivering a second-class talk, and therefore I just had to do it." Anyway, that's someone who's given a tremendous gift and they act ordinary, like an amazing, amazing model for us.